This is what most Americans innocently put into their bodies these days, and most alarmingly, into the bodies of their children.
Is red meat really the single best food you can eat? So that was pretty fun to see my video used in an AI-generated video on red meat being bad, when in that video I said red meat was actually pretty good for you. Should you avoid all ultra-processed food? And how do you define ultra-processed? Hi, I'm Dr. Eric Westman, and welcome to my channel where I review and debunk nutritional information online. In this video, we're going to hear about ultra-processed food, how it's defined by many different people and how it probably harms those who eat it, but we all are kind of accustomed to eating it. And then some people seem to get away with it, others can't. And then how could you make a change to reduce this consumption on a public health level? Be sure to listen to the end where I give my final thoughts.
We're having epidemics of all these chronic illnesses, autoimmune diseases, neurological diseases, allergic diseases.
We all have our guilty pleasures, but some foods are so unhealthy that even just a little can do a number on your body.
Well, so this is timely because RFK Jr. is now going to be leading some of the governmental change, I hope favorable change, to help people understand what they're eating. And yeah, I totally agree that the consumption of these sugary cereals for kids is a big problem. No, it's a huge problem. And I wish people would go back to bacon and eggs. In fact, that's what I teach. Why not have your children raised on bacon and eggs, like many people who are, well, not even my age now. I mean, even those in their 70s and 80s may have had bacon and eggs. I grew up on cereal. I know Captain Crunch and Tony the Tiger, and that by the 60s, when I grew up, we were all consuming all that stuff. And it seems like you can get away with it for a while, but the long-term issues are that you're addicted to this kind of food. And the awareness of this, especially at a governmental level, has never been so high. So that's fantastic. I'd like to give a big thank you to our friends at Element for sponsoring today's video. Element offers a fantastic science-backed mix of sodium, potassium, and magnesium, essential electrolytes for anyone on a keto diet. In particular, their raw, unflavored version, which comes in the blue, teal-colored package, is a great choice. This specific version contains no stevia, no sugar, or any additives, just the 3 vital electrolytes your body needs, already perfectly measured for you. It's an excellent addition to a keto diet, and more importantly, it tastes great. As you may know, electrolytes play a crucial role, especially for those following a keto or carnivore lifestyle. Element is giving you the chance to try it out with a free sample pack included in any purchase. That means you'll receive 8 single-serving packets at no extra cost with your order. It's a perfect way to test it out and even share Element with a friend. Get yours now at drinkelement.com/Eric Westman. This special offer is only available through my link, drinkelement.com/Eric Westman. You'll also find it in the description below. Now let's get back to the video.
In this video, we will look at 20 foods that Americans need to stop eating.
So that Americans understand it and make sure that Americans are aware of it. I don't want to take food away from anybody.
Potato chips. Potato chips are everywhere. They're at parties, in lunch boxes, and stacked on the store shelves in flashy bags that make them impossible to ignore.
This is my bag of Ruffles potato chips.
And once you open a bag, it's game over. No one eats just one. But the sad reality is that these crispy, salty slices of heaven are doing serious damage to your body, bite by bite.
So I'm not a fan of potato chips, and of course it wasn't long ago when one of the manufacturers said, bet you can't eat just one. And now they don't do that anymore. I think they'd be put under public derision if they did. But my lead here would be that it's full of carbs, so that the potato gets digested to sugar, and the sugar gets absorbed, and in the context of a high carb diet, that's going to lead to obesity and type 2 diabetes. to lead with salt is an old paradigm view that it's high in salt, and so I would rather have emphasis on the sugar and the starch that's in the potato chip and the addictive nature of it, that you can't stop eating it, so you're going to be over consuming on a regular basis. They're hinting toward that in terms of the palatability, and people love them, but the focus on the element that's a problem to me is not so much the salt or the oil that it's in, it's the carbohydrate that it's made of.
And because they're designed to stay crispy for months, they're often loaded with preservatives that don't belong in your body. Let's also not forget about acrylamides, which are chemicals that form when starchy foods are fried at high temperatures. Studies suggest acrylamides could be linked to an increased risk of cancer. And while research is ongoing, do you really want to take that risk for a handful of chips? If you're shocked by this, what other food items are even more dangerous? Brace yourself. The most shocking part is still ahead.
The lack of mentioning of carbs, to me, this is a problem. Of all of the things that we know of research-wise, prospective, randomized controlled trials, to try to reduce the chronic medical conditions of obesity, type 2 diabetes, dietary-wise, you either use a very low-calorie diet or a very low-carb diet. And because a low-carb diet reduces your caloric intake pretty much automatically if you cut all the carbs out at once. That's one reason why I use it as an obesity medicine expert. Of course, today as a doctor, you're going to hear people talking about the shots and the pills and all that, but here we're trying to focus on what can we change in the food. And to me, it would be just the fact that it's made out of a potato.
French fries. French fries might just be one of the hardest foods to give up. They're served with burgers, piled high on plates at diners, and come in a red carton that practically calls your name at drive-thrus. But here's the brutal truth. These crispy golden potato sticks are health nightmares. A plain baked potato, about 93 calories and hardly any fat. Deep fry it into fries, you're now looking at 310 calories and 14.7 grams of fat per 100 grams. That's not just a minor jump. It's a full-on transformation from harmless veggie to a fat-soaked disaster.
Well, again, the kind of dramatic extremes is common on internet teaching. It's not necessarily harmless when it's just a potato. And then, how many of you have relatives who've eaten French fries and they live to 100? I mean, so we're talking about something that's not going to kill you tomorrow, but it does give some harm over time to susceptible individuals. And this is kind of a tough concept to implement in a public health measure. How do you select out those for whom something is harmful? It would be like if someone has the phenotype, someone who's already heavy, you would want to restrict sugar just for them. And if someone is lean and doesn't have diabetes, they could have the sugar. And that's kind of hard to do in a political environment, to single out people based on their how they look. But if someone has fair skin, they should put on some sunscreen before they go out in the sun for a long time. And yet we don't put sunscreen on people generally. They have to do it themselves. So the idea that the focus here is on the oils and the fat, and you even heard the caloric word in there, is okay, but I still think it's missing the point that it's made out of potato.
But the real danger isn't just the extra calories. It's what happens during the deep frying process. Potatoes lose water and absorb loads of oil, and that oil isn't the good kind. It's often packed with trans fats and saturated fats, both of which raise bad cholesterol and increase the risk of heart disease. And let's talk about portion sizes. No one ever eats just a handful of fries.
Well, hang on. So here it sounds like an AI-generated script, but the harmful saturated fats and trans fats were all in one sentence there. Well, it's been years now since the saturated fat is not an issue for heart disease and should not be limited by a guideline came out written by the researchers on saturated fats. And it's taken years for that to percolate through to guidelines and other organizations, and yet you'll still see people saying saturated fat is bad. I don't believe it is. Trans fats, sure, and yet I don't know of any randomized trial that told people to have trans fats and not have trans fats. That came from nutritional epidemiology research, and the associations really weren't all that great. So again, we have to remember where the data have come from. I don't know of any randomized trial where some people were given French fries without the oils and French fries with the oils, or a different type of oil, and to see if one led to more problems than another. And you might argue, well, those studies can't be done, and well, then we don't know the answers to those questions, do we?
Healthy fats and none of the regret. Breakfast cereals. Breakfast cereals might seem like a harmless way to start your morning, but don't be fooled by the bright packaging and health claims. Many cereals are nothing more than sugar bombs disguised as breakfast. A single serving can contain up to 18 grams of sugar, about 5 teaspoons, which is dangerously close to the daily limit of 9 teaspoons for men and 6 for women. And let's be honest, when was the last time you actually measured out a single serving?
Typical mom on a family farm in pre-industrial agrarian times.
Most people pour double that amount without even realizing it. But sugar isn't the only problem. Most cereals are made from refined grains, which means the natural fiber and nutrients have been stripped away during processing.
Yay, we heard the term sugar for the first time.
This leads to quick digestion, blood sugar spikes, and energy crashes, leaving you hungry way before lunchtime. Over time, this pattern increases the risk of weight gain, insulin resistance, and even type 2 diabetes.
This is not to say all cereals are bad, because it is still a healthier choice for your kids. I know my kids eat cereal.
And
Healthier than what? I wonder what, among the cereals, even things that are purported to be less harmful for you, that don't have sugar, they're really high in carbs. And so again, I'm going back to the eggs and bacon, and even if you're trying to reverse diabetes and obesity, you don't even have to have breakfast. The idea that breakfast is the most important meal of the day, guess who came up with that? The cereal industry. So you don't have to have breakfast. How's that for controversial?
Actually counterbalance that added sugar. And the same goes for artificial colors and dyes that go into there.
your body deserves real food, not a bowl of candy disguised as a morning meal.
Yeah, so the artificial dye and additives, I don't know of any randomized trials looking at in humans that these cause cancer. Again, these are associational things. And I know it's an easy target to go after these additives, but wouldn't it be better suited to go after the sugar and starch, the carbs, basically to reduce obesity and type 2 diabetes for sure? And then there's a lot of research on keto and cancer now, so that staying away from the glucose insulin rise may actually have a protective effect. We don't know for sure yet, but I think the taking a shot or a reduction of cereal would make a big difference, depending on what you compare it with or put in instead, substitute in. If you substituted in pancakes, for example, made out of flour, and I'm a little surprised that there wasn't mention of gluten in the grains, and because gluten is a problem for many people, causing celiac disease, and malabsorption, and sensitivity, and so there's really no requirement that you need to have these foods, and I think that's a good food to have on the list.
But you might want to rethink your next meal after this. Instant noodles. Instant ramen may be the ultimate quick meal, but it's far from a healthy one.
Today, we investigate instant soups and ramen noodles.
While it's cheap, convenient, and undeniably tasty, it's also loaded with sodium, unhealthy fats, and practically no real nutrition. A single serving can contain up to 1,500 milligrams of sodium, about 3/4 of the recommended daily limit. And since most people eat the entire package, they're consuming nearly a full day's worth of salt in one sitting. What's the problem with too much sodium? It makes your body retain water, leading to bloating, high blood pressure, and increased strain on your heart.
So that's another old paradigm view, that restricting sodium is going to have some magical effect on reducing diabetes or other chronic health problems. It's true, when you eat carbs, you can raise the blood pressure with salt. In fact, there was a program at Duke in Durham, where I am, called the rice diet, where they cut the sodium and salt out to almost nothing. They measured the urine, and if there was any sodium in it, they knew someone was cheating on the rice diet because it was so devoid of sodium. And it worked really well to lower the blood pressure. It was used by doctors for lowering the blood pressure before the medications became available. Once the medicines became available, the diet kind of lost favor because it's easier for doctors to just prescribe medications. But the point is, salt can have an effect on the blood pressure. In fact, I saw that in a clinical setting where a nurse's aide asked me to run, stat to get a bouillon cube mixed in hot water. And this was one of my first days working at the old Duke Diet and Fitness Center, and there was a patient who was kind of disoriented and didn't know where he was. And it turned out his blood pressure was really low. And so I ran in there, gave him some salt to sip. His blood pressure came up 10, 15 points, and he looked around and said, "How did I get here?" So he was on too many blood pressure medicines, and during the weight loss process, there was a little blip where his blood pressure got too low. We didn't reduce the medicine fast enough, which is always a concern of mine. If you're on medicines and you start a keto or carnivore type of diet, watch the medicines carefully. But the point is, the salt can raise the blood pressure. Now, population-wise, if you're cutting carbs out and salt out, it's interesting. The main message I give is measure it. So if you're on blood pressure medicine, you're changing a diet or losing weight, just measure the blood pressure. Don't worry about what they say out there. See the effect it has on your own body as you're going through that change.
To give them that long shelf life, they're often deep fried before packaging, meaning they're loaded with unhealthy trans fats. These fats clog arteries, raise bad cholesterol levels, and increase the risk of obesity and heart disease. If you love ramen, try making a healthier version with fresh noodles, low-sodium broth, and real vegetables. As Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said, "I pray all Americans stop eating these foods, and instant ramen is definitely one of them."
That would be an easy study to do, to debunk that idea. Have people make their own ramen without the additives, have ramen with the additives, see the effect on the blood sugar. It's still going to be high. So again, we're seeing a video that's kind of missing the point that carbs are the root cause. Of course, calories too, but carbs are the easier target to reduce because the consumption is so high and the benefit is so quick. If you cut out the MSG in there, you're not going to see a lowering of the blood glucose. Maybe you'd have less cancer 20 years from now. But if you cut the carbs out, use a low-carb ramen or noodle substitute, they're out there, it's called shirataki noodles, you'll see that the blood sugar doesn't go up much, neither does the blood pressure. So interesting, missing the mark again, in my view.
What other processed food should you avoid? You're at the edge of your seat and it's about to get even better. Instant mashed potatoes.
Today we are taking a 50-pound bag of potatoes that we got and turning them into instant mashed potatoes.
Instant mashed potatoes might seem like a lifesaver on busy nights, but they come with hidden downsides that could make you rethink that quick fix. These dehydrated flakes may resemble real mashed potatoes, but they're packed with extra ingredients that change their nutritional value entirely. One big concern is the sodium content. A single serving can contain...
that sodium content. I was kind of shocked that this one made the list. Are instant potatoes really that common?
Contain around 440 milligrams of sodium, which is nearly 25% of the recommended daily limit. But let's be honest, no one eats just one serving. If you're adding butter or extra seasoning, that number climbs even higher. Too much sodium can lead to high blood pressure, bloating, and increased risk of heart disease. Then there's the calorie count. While fresh potatoes are relatively low in calories, Instant mashed potatoes pack over 200 calories per cup. That's because manufacturers add unhealthy saturated fats and preservatives to improve the texture and flavor. These additives can contribute to weight gain and other long-term health problems.
Did you hear that?
Remember the best-selling book, Potatoes, Not Prozac?
Did you hear that unhealthy saturated fat comment?
Well, I have no love lost on antidepressants.
Speaking of additives, instant mashed potatoes contain emulsifiers and stabilizers to give them a creamy, smooth texture.
Completely cooked, we drained all the water out and just mashed all the potatoes.
Some brands even include ingredients like silicon dioxide and artificial flavors, which have little to no nutritional benefit. For a healthier alternative, try mashing fresh potatoes at home. It takes a little more effort, but you'll avoid excessive...
What? So in my clinic, don't have potatoes at all. Don't have mashed potatoes. And going from instant to mash your own, is that going to really be... We could do a study, randomize people to either mashing their own potatoes at home or I'm sorry, it's kind of funny, or instant mashed potatoes, and let's see how their blood sugar is. Let's see if we can reverse type 2 diabetes. Oh boy, so the substituting of mashed potatoes, no. How about mashed cauliflower? That's what I was looking for. This would have been a great video. End up with mashed cauliflower as a substitute. The carb level is low, they're delicious if you add enough butter, but don't say unsaturated fat, or excuse me, don't say healthy, don't say unhealthy saturated, I can't even say it anymore, unhealthy saturated fats, because you're adding butter on your mashed cauliflower. It's delicious.
preservatives, and unhealthy fats. Plus, keeping the skins on adds extra fiber and nutrients. Your body and your taste buds will thank you. Microwaved popcorn. Microwave popcorn might be the easiest movie night snack, but there's a lot more in that bag than just popcorn. While plain air-popped popcorn is a healthy whole-grain snack, the microwavable kind comes loaded with chemicals, artificial flavorings, and unhealthy fats. One major issue is the packaging. Microwave popcorn bags are often coated with perfluorinated compounds, which prevent grease from soaking through the bag.
But anyway, 95% of popcorn is GMO. So that's one of the problems.
A lot of people come to me having eaten microwave popcorn, and to me, it's not the additives, those other things. It's the fact that it's corn, and corn has carbs. There was a kind of a urban legend out there that popcorn didn't raise the blood glucose. I had a couple students check that out on themselves, and they actually found that a healthy, non-diabetic student had elevations in blood sugar after having popcorn, even microwave popcorn. So the fact that there are carbs, and starches get digested to sugar, that's why I'm not a fan of microwave popcorn. But we'll see that, wait, I'll bet salt is the reason.
Hot dog. Talk about the ultimate junk food. If you've ever wondered what's really inside a hot dog, you might want to look away now. These processed meat sticks are made from meat trimmings, which is just a fancy way of saying leftover bits of pork, beef, or chicken that have been mechanically separated into a paste.
So hang on. I'm going to take issue with this one. I think hot dogs are fine. And it's the grams of carbs is what I teach my patients to watch on any kind of food. And well, but this is called eating offal, O-F-F-A-L, eating nose to tail. You wouldn't avoid eating the trimmings and even the organ meats and all that in sausages. That's where they are. Why avoid it? And I just kind of defies explanation, other than we've lost touch with the preparation of the food. And so if it seems unclean or bad, we can put it in our minds that, oh, it must be bad. I'm not against hot dogs. I'm against the bun. On the low carb diet, if you're going to do a low carb diet, you can have hot dogs. You just can't have the bun or the bread that it's served in. That's easy to work around. Just don't eat the bun.
Well, what about red meat? Stay tuned. The unhealthy details about red meat will leave you speechless. Red meat, a juicy burger at a barbecue or a perfectly cooked steak, might be a delicious treat, but eating red meat regularly could spell trouble for your health. Red meat is high in saturated fat, which can increase bad cholesterol levels.
Old paradigm. The new paradigm talks about LDL. No, HDL in the blood, triglyceride in the blood, reducing the abdominal circumference, keeping the blood pressure, the blood sugar low. That's what's called metabolic syndrome.
And put you at risk for heart disease when consumed in excess.
It's the red meat that's causing the cancer and not all the other foods that they're eating, okay? So
yeah, so the association of red meat with cancer is very small. And when I've talked to the nutritional epidemiologists, they say, well, that's about what we see with food and cancer. And I say, well, that's not good enough. So, I mean, just because it's the best that they see, but it's very, very small, we call that statistically significant, and we question whether it's clinically significant or clinically relevant. And so there are several nutritional epidemiology programs and studies going on. They're not all in agreement about whether red meat is bad and causes cancer, which is interesting, an interesting finding. The idea that red meat keeps the blood glucose and insulin low and reverses diabetes and obesity is, again, another avenue, another mechanism toward cancer reduction that will not be seen in a nutritional epidemiology study of carb eaters eating red meat with that association. So the nutritional epidemiology studies also mainly study carb eaters. And so you could say, well, red meat in that context might be bad, but in this metabolism, it might not be until it's studied.
Studies have linked excessive red meat consumption to higher risks of heart disease, diabetes, and even certain cancers. Processed red meats, like bacon and sausages, are even worse due to added preservatives and nitrates.
I don't agree. And so here, now we're getting into what does processed food mean? What does processed meat mean? And if there's a small amount of nitrates or nitrites, they're nitrites and nitrates in vegetable matter. It's a little known fact, and that's kind of brushed under the carpet. So actually, you're going to be getting some of these. So the idea that it needs to be totally zeroed out, to me, is just not really proven health-wise and not practicable, just not manageable in an era where you're trying to feed lots of different people. Oh, if you can go to the farmer's market and buy local food that's not processed, fantastic. But how, on a public health level, can you say, no, anything that has a nitrate or nitrate, nope, can't have it, artificial dye, nope, can't have it. So this is focusing on things that really are going to be very difficult to change, unless you work around from the carb angle, the sugars and the starches, and consider ultra-processed food really as a problem of excess carbohydrates. That's where the money is, I think.
Which have been connected to long-term health risks. Another downside, red meat takes longer to digest compared to other proteins, which can leave you feeling sluggish.
I don't know about that. Oh, is red meat really the single best food you can eat? So that was pretty fun to see my video used in an AI-generated video on red meat being bad, when in that video I said red meat was actually pretty good for you.
Plus, grilling or frying red meat at high temperatures can create harmful compounds called heterocyclic amines and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, which have been linked to cancer. Instead of making red meat a regular part of your diet, consider healthier alternatives. Grilled salmon or sashimi is packed with omega-3 fatty acids.
Because most people are caught in the crossfire of conflicting information.
You know how many of my patients in Durham, North Carolina could find salmon like that? Not a great workaround.
Brown red meat,
which support heart health and reduce inflammation. Plant-based options like lentils, beans, and tofu also provide plenty of protein without the health risks, making the...
So when protein comes in a bean, look up the carb content. So a cup, which is roughly a fistful, measure your fist, compare it to a measuring cup, and then throw away the measuring cup. A cup, it's about an apple size, regular apple, is 20 grams of carbs total, not net, per cup, per fistful. Beans, lentils, and these other starchy beans are 40 grams of carbs for that cupful, as well as rice. So not a great workaround for a protein source when you're trying to keep the carb level low. Beans, not a great choice. So what's kind of missing here is, wrapping up, is the idea that starches are really just sugar molecules all connected, and we digest the starches into sugar. You'll know this if you have a continuous glucose monitor or measure your blood sugar in any way, because after having potato, pasta, rice, noodles, the substitutes even that are suggested here, the blood sugar will go up. So starches get digested to sugar. Sugar elevation is the pathway toward obesity. The sugar gets turned. The sugar elevation is the pathway to obesity. That extra sugar gets turned to fat, and we store fat on our bodies, not sugar. And then if you can't store the fat really well, you end up having elevated glucose levels in the blood, and that's called prediabetes, diabetes, type 2 diabetes, insulin resistance. Carbohydrate intolerance is the term that we use to just call out that it's a problem with handling the carbohydrate. And if you we call it carbohydrate intolerance, because if you eliminate the carbohydrate, it all gets better. So it's as if people are intolerant to the carbohydrate. So when they go to the workarounds that I thought of in this video, if you go to the cauliflower rice, the shirataki noodles, the other things that don't have so much sugar and starch, you're going to be having a beneficial effect. One of the problems, again, in doing anything in a public health way is that there are people who can get away with eating these things and don't get diabetes. Just like with alcohol, even with smoking. There are some people who drink and smoke and they don't ever get a health problem. So we're looking at the generalities, and on balance, what would happen if we took away all of the dyes in the cereals? I don't think there'd be a whole lot of improvement. What if we took away all of the seed oils from the manufacturing of the food? I don't think there'd be a whole lot of improvement. What you want to do is focus on the sugars and the starches. There are randomized trials, prospective comparative studies looking at carb level and carb reduction and get improvements compared to low fat and other types of diets, without regard to teaching about the seed oils or the microbiome or all these other kind of novel things that I think are a bit of a distraction. So in your world, your personal health, focus on the carbohydrates. Of course, if you're cutting out cereals, you're cutting out the colorants, the dyes, the additives. And so a properly formulated low-carb, keto, carnivore diet excludes all of those things, or much of those things. And that is where the benefit comes from. I'm Dr. Eric Westman. I hope you enjoyed this. Plus, like if you like, subscribe, ring the notification bell, look for new content on Wednesdays and Fridays. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, and check out AdaptYourLifeAcademy.com.